So Eva Longoria, John Wick was set to not actually like happen. Like they were going through money. They were having a really hard time getting the rest of the funding they needed. And then Eva Longoria just came in with a $6 million check and was like, hey, here's some Desperate Housewives money. Go and make your movie. And now is Eva Longoria the true savior of like an amazing film franchise? I think it has to be yes.
Eva Longoria looked everyone dead in the eyes and said, kill that dog.
There's so many fun facts that are coming out about John Wick with its 10th anniversary. Like, it was actually called Scorn, but Keanu Reeves would just keep calling it John Wick all the time in meetings and interviews. And so they just abandoned the title and called it John Wick. It's the Snakes on a Plane thing where Samuel L. Jackson's like, no. The movie is called Snakes on a Plane. I don't care what your title is.
Now I'm just thinking about other movies where it's just like, you know what? The title needs to be something else. Like it can't be this. Oh God, what's a good example that you guys could think of like
what
a movie?
What the fuck does No Country for Old Men mean? They don't even bring it up until a quote in the end credit segment.
Do you want it to be "I Drink Your Milkshake"? That's the working title. Of
oh God, you're mixing up your 2007
that's There
Oscars.
Will Be Blood.
Oh, that's There Will Be Blood. Yeah, no.
Just
There Will Be Blood is pretty straightforward.
If every single interview to the press, Javier Bardem was like, "So I'm working on a new movie called Friendo."
Oh my God. I do adore the concept of that. I think it would be a lot more funny to be able to like market a movie that way, but also a lot more interesting because like there's so many examples of movies that are just so poorly named that they were like, you know what? We fucked up and we're going to try this while it's in theaters to rename it into something entirely different.
Are you talking about how like Edge of Tomorrow basically just retconned itself into being Live, Die, Repeat?
Yeah, exactly. 5 different titles it went through because no one knew what it was about. But I, to this day, think that is such a great action movie that like is just a victim of really bad marketing.
Do you know what we're talking about here, Rich?
Literally no.
So it's that movie with Emily Blunt and Tom Cruise, and it's a killer action movie, but everyone just wanted to call it by its tagline of Live, Die, Repeat. Like, everyone kind of forgot it was called Edge of Tomorrow, so when they released it on DVD and Blu-ray, they hid Edge of Tomorrow really small in font on the box and just put in big letters, Live, Die, Repeat.
What?
And I highly recommend that you watch that because it's a sick movie, like really well done.
But you do have to search Edge of Tomorrow, despite what everyone wants you to.
Well, okay, so wait a minute. So so this is the movie where Tom Cruise basically respawns every time he dies, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Or it's kind of like a Groundhog Day-ish thing where he wakes up in the same place over and over?
It's actually a true story about how Tom Cruise found Scientology. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, no, it sounds so dumb and it sounds so straightforward, but it's such a well-done movie that I'm like, yeah, you know what? I hate that the marketing department fucked this one up so badly because like I love talking about that movie because it's just so dumb and fun.
If the Scientology overall production team is listening to this, I want to make it very clear that Geoff and I have different stances on Scientology. And if you would like to become a producer on this podcast, be it silent, we would love to have you.
Hello, passengers, and welcome aboard the TV pilot's license with service to Washington, D.C. and the Eisenhower Executive Office building. We ask that you please fasten your headphones, secure your podcasting device, and remember that on this flight, all utensils will be made of cornstarch. But we don't recommend actually using them for food, but don't you feel a little bit better about the environment?
Welcome to the TV Pilot's License. My name is Geoff Kerbis, joined by Rich Inman and Max Singer. How you boys doing today?
Good. Welcome to all of our frequent dyers to our Halloween spooktacular.
Rich, how are you, bud?
I'm doing great. I don't see any flaws in cornstarch utensils. Let's work on this.
Well, gentlemen, this week we are talking about the scariest thing, of course, for our Halloween episode, and that is politics. And we decided to dive into VEEP. But before we dive too deep into this HBO classic, Max, what's this podcast all about?
Here at TV Pilot's License, we break down and analyze the pilot episodes of some of TV's most famous, or in some cases, infamous shows. We learn a little bit more about how these shows came to be and were originally made, if they're effective pilot episodes in making us want to watch more, and if we think they can be made today. Go back and stream our old episodes from wherever you listen to podcasts. Check us out on YouTube and TikTok to see our smiling faces. And if it is your first time flying with us, then welcome aboard.
And Rich, what is your question of the week?
To ask this question, I thought I would surprise you guys with a special guest. Bring out Vice President Al Gore. I can't believe I asked him to do The Sopranos and then we immediately do Veep.
It's too close to home for him.
This week I'm very curious because this is a show that I have watched every episode of, and Selina Meyer's character basically jaded by not being the president, and that's her main career want throughout the entirety of the show. Now, I would love to know if you had to choose between the presidency or the vice presidency as your own job, what would you pick?
You got to go vice president, and let me explain why. There's the idea of being the guy with the clipboard on the sideline, right? Like, you get the salary, you get to show up to the State of the Union, but you don't have to speak. You just have to stand and clap when, your homie makes a good point. And there's something beautiful about that. Sometimes you get to be the tie-breaking vote, so people are like, oh, how important, how amazing. But at the end of the day, if you want, after you're vice president, you can just retire. You still get Secret Service and a little bit of that function. You still get clearance and all of that. And you still get a lot of the prestige. Like, I can go and do a book deal. I can go and do a speaking tour if I want. But I don't have to worry about everyone being like, well, fuck that guy. He was the president. And yeah, it's okay being number two sometimes, and I'm okay with being number two sometimes. Max, what about yourself?
Yeah, you're looking at the ceremonial bad boy here. I'm talking about Easter egg hunts. I'm talking about lighting of menorahs and Christmas trees during the holiday season. People can name every single U.S. president order. I dare you to do it for every single vice president. It is a ceremonial, and
I wish I knew who was vice president now.
For the most part, inconsequential role. For years, we didn't need to know who VEEPs were. Take the heat off me. I will do some good old supervising of that Senate, cast a vote when I need to, give a speech when asked, but I'm down to just hang on the sidelines and be a little worker bee.
We love being a pinch hitter. Rich, what about yourself?
I don't have to break any sort of Senate tie here. This is unanimous. I'm going VP all the way. I did not know they got to retain Secret Service throughout the rest of their lives like the actual presidents do. But yeah, I cannot imagine everyone having an opinion on everything I do for every single day. Meanwhile, people forget about the vice president constantly. And the vice president used to be some guy who used to screw off and go back to his hometown for a while. It was up until very recently that they even lived in their own house. It was just I'm living at not the vice president's mansion. I'm living at, whatever house I could find in DC. I take the heat off. I want to put my feet up. I want to meet all the ambassadors. Also, a lot of VPs get a cushy ambassador job. That would be so sick. I'm so down for that.
Rich, when you said they don't live in their own house till very recently, I'm picturing kind of like a Yes Dear Casita situation where you just kind of live out back.
Doug Emhoff is just Kramering his way into the White House.
There's a really cool tree house in the back of the White House. That's where Kamala lives. Well, Rich, thank you so much for your question of the week. Let's talk a little bit more about VEEP. But before we do so, a quick synopsis. Former Senator Selina Meyer finds that being Vice President of the United States is nothing like she hoped, and everything that everyone never warned her about. Which I think, that's what we're going to be talking about today. That's a really solid synopsis. But Max, can you tell us a little bit more about how this show got made?
Today, we are talking about the pilot episode of VEEP titled Fundraiser, which originally aired on April 22nd, 2012 on HBO And we'll be talking about the show's creator, Armando Iannucci, a little bit to kick things off. A Scottish writer and director, Iannucci began his career in entertainment after dropping out of his PhD program in 17th century religious language at Oxford and taking a job as a radio producer at the BBC.
Who among us?
After moving to London, Iannucci created the Radio 4 series On the Hour, a satirical radio news program. The show became a hit and was adapted for television as The Day Today. While only lasting one series and 6 episodes, its cultural impact remains, in part to it being the creation of comedian Steve Coogan's iconic character Alan Partridge. In 2005, for BBC4, Iannucci creates the political satire The Thick of It, centered around a government minister, his advisors, and their party's spin doctor. The Thick of It is considered a critical and cultural success in the UK with a number of BAFTA television awards, a mainstay on multiple UK publications' best show lists, and its spin-off film In the Loop, released in 2009, which earned Iannucci an Academy Award nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay. Even before its Oscar nomination, American studios are hot to try to adapt The Thick of It here in the US. The rights are acquired by ABC, with the new series created by Mitch Hurwitz and Richard Day of Arrested Development. Iannucci's involvement is solely a production credit. Directed by Christopher Guest and starring John Michael Higgins, Oliver Platt, Rhea Seehorn, and Michael McKeon, the show failed to get picked up by ABC in 2007. After being dropped at ABC, HBO, Showtime, and NBC all approached Iannucci about a new attempt at adapting The Thick of It, with Iannucci striking a deal with HBO, who gave him creative control over the series. A pilot was commissioned in late 2009, with filming taking place in Maryland in February 2011. The series was picked up in April of 2011, with filming starting that October after several months of rehearsals designed to build comfort with the level of improvisation Iannucci was looking for. A final fun fact, VEEP's first season production around Baltimore created 978 local jobs and is said to have generated $40 million for the state of Maryland.
Hey, nice.
Yeah, and an additional small fun fact about that, they ended up staying in the DMV area for filming for 4 seasons. Wow. This show is one of the few that actually received tax incentives by the California Institute of Film, which allowed it to move. And then they would only film in DC for like 8 days at a time in the following 3 seasons. So
interesting.
The more you know.
Now, I assume neither of you guys have seen In the Thick of It, which sounds like a failed Alan Thicke sitcom, but neither of you guys have seen it. But like, is the format of that similar to Veep as we know it, where there's a lot of improvising?
I haven't seen it, Rich.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, like, it didn't say in your research or anything like that. That it was similar style.
I watched one pilot for this episode of this podcast, and it was not that. But
it was the one with Christopher Guest, Michael McKeon, Rhea Seehorn.
Good. I'm glad we all watched the same one.
Well, let's dive into Veep. And I love, and I think one of the things that's super well done at the beginning of this pilot, we have this really short intro to the show that gives us all the exposition we're going to get. And then this immediately becomes a workplace comedy. And I think that is such a clever, let's not hound on this. Let's just dive in and let's let all of these amazing comedians just shine in this pilot. I'm curious from you two, were you wanting a little bit more of an explanation of Selina and her campaign, or did you like this intro as it was?
I don't need anything more than what I got. Veep is a textbook example of enter late and leave early.
Yes.
This day could have been yesterday. It could have been the day before. It could have been 2 weeks from now. You're just in the workplace. I think that this quick little montage of newspaper clippings and bylines and chyrons to show the ups and downs of her presidential campaign and eventually coming onto the Veep ticket is really all the primer you need to know. If you look closely, she's a senator from Maryland. She ran for president. She got the Veep role. Her ticket won the election, and now we are in another workday.
Yep. Yeah, it is. I think it speaks well to the relentlessness of the job, or the relentlessness of just working in Washington politics anyways. You know, especially with the 24-hour news cycle, there's just kind of never a period of time where you don't have to address something. I mean, that's why before people used to like save like controversial press statements that the president was going to put out until like Friday afternoon, when people would be expected not to see the news, but people watch CNN over the weekend now. Like, there is no time. And like Max, you said it perfectly, the enter late, leave early of it all. There is at no point where I don't think this show has a single scene where someone enters like to start the scene. It is everyone's already there, and then maybe a third, like an extra person shows up, and there's nothing else.
Yeah, I think really the only instance that we had of that was Selina going to that the meet and greet with the fellow senators, where there were people there and maybe they entered. That's the only instance. But I'm curious. We meet Selina's core staff, right? There's a few different characters. They all seem to have very different jobs. I'm curious, who was your favorite from like these 1 or 2 line interactions on first blush? Because instantly I think, wow, I love Tony Hale's Gary, because I need a Gary. I need someone who is just like in my ear being a buffoon, but also giving me everyone's name, because holy shit, I have the worst time with names, y'all. Like, I have to look at your 2 names on the screen on our recording device to remember who you are. But I'm curious, who do you want as far as just?
Yeah, we've only known each other
meetings?
14 years.
Yeah, every time I'm just like, that's Bob, right? That's Bob Inman.
I'm not going to also say Gary Walsh played by Tony Hale, because I don't want this just to be Tony Hale Appreciation Hour. So I'm going to say probably my favorite up top is Matt Walsh as Mike McClintock, her press secretary, director of comms. It's just so funny because he plays the, I guess, like older fish in a new spawning pool of talent. And there's this great runner of all of these references that Mike tries to use as digs and insult at younger, up-and-coming hotshot staffers that no one understands. He makes references to My Left Foot, Doogie Howser, and Moonlighting throughout this pilot, all of which go over the heads of the people he addresses to. And I think he represents this kind of changing of the guard. The way he does things in 2012 is probably, as we're really pivoting towards a super digital era, as we're really going hard into iPhone and smartphone and, you know, the Twitter sphere. And Mike represents this kind of like old school DC comms guy who's probably stuck by Selina for a long time, but just isn't in touch anymore. That's a really fun role to get to play.
I do really appreciate that they have Matt Walsh do those jokes, though, because you can tell that those jokes, while there's a part of the audience like our age demographic that's like, oh, no one gets these references. Oh, how funny, he's old. There's definitely a demographic that's watching this that finds that those jokes are ones that really they appreciate, almost like too much. Like the crew that saw like, oh, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is in this show. I love her from Seinfeld. Like they watched it when Seinfeld was first on the air. They're going to be like, oh, a Doogie Howser joke. Holy shit, that was perfect. Like, Rich, I'm curious about you. Like this introduction scene and seeing these characters. What are your thoughts initially?
I personally think that my favorite off from the jump is Sue, the executive assistant for Selina Meyer. Sue is going to be like needle pointing, like all of her jokes. They're all very like making fun of the people who are just like panicking around them. Sue has an extremely calm demeanor. It's like she's been doing this for a long time and doesn't have to have that same live or die mentality with the person she's working for. And like, I feel like that if there's one rule for all the characters surrounding Selina Meyer on Veep, it's you are going to do everything that is humanly possible for this character until you have a little bit of leverage, and then you're going to throw them to the wolves. That seems to be like the overarching theme for all this. But I think Sue does an incredible job.
What do you guys think about the way that we approach the issue, or what makes this day special? Because there seem to be a variety of them that just sort of, they seem to pop up very spontaneously, right? And maybe that's due to the nature of this being such an improv heavy show, that we have this issue with Selina pissing off the plastics lobbyists. Then we also have Selina using a terrible joke that she picked up from a senator that we'll talk about in a little bit. And then also this the card fiasco that we have at the end of the episode. It seems like this show packs in a lot all at once. And do you find that appealing, or maybe a little bit too busy?
I think it's super appealing to me. I like that we are going to always be putting out little fires, and it keeps things moving. Veep doesn't necessarily work on a typical arc structure of like, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we hit it, all is lost, and then we resolve it. Right. It is a crazy straw of plot structure, and it gives the actors so much freedom to improvise and to play and discover their space. And it also is part of that thing of, we're always going to be leaving early. We're never going to put neat bows on things. Even the way that this episode ends, not to give anything away, is that the day is just going on in the background. Credits are rolling while the scene is still playing out, and then it's just done.
Yep.
Veep is never going to start and finish in a traditional linear sitcom format, and I think that just makes it really engaging to watch.
I think Parks and Rec, if I can make a comparison, is very interesting to watch in as a not a mirror of Veep or a mirror of any of the like other governmental shows that depict basically like an extremely fast paced dealing of issues. Like, you know, Parks and Rec is painfully slow with how they deal with everything. It is miring over $1,000. It is not like, okay, one thing could potentially disrupt the entire oil industry, that kind of thing. And I think like that is another aspect of how the pacing of the show works super well for what it does. And yeah, you don't get the essentially overall big bad of the episode, which is good. It's just like, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, but the Matt Stone and Trey Parker NYU seminar that they did like a while ago, where they're talking about if this then that happens, rather than like this happens. It is captivating because you're watching the butterfly effect of everything, like every decision made throughout this entire staff.
Veep off the bat too is a mean show. It has teeth, and I mean that as such a compliment. And it's something that I have to keep reminding myself that the show did premiere 12 years ago, because it feels really fresh. Maybe because for the last 12 years, I've heard every single thing that happens in government described as, oh my God, it's a Veep situation.
Yep.
But Veep has Fangs, Halloween episode, that a lot of other comedies in the last decade don't. And it is cutting, it is aggressive, it is mean, there are insults, and they all feel earned. Like everything feels like it's part of the character. It feels worn in. It feels like these statements are appropriate for who says them, and that's really fitting too.
So a question for you two, and Max, I think you bring up a really good point about how the show does have teeth, is the idea that this show's writing room was entirely made up of folks who are British, which I know like sounds a little bit silly, but at the same time,
that does sound crazy.
But does that give it the credence of like, oh, you know what? That's maybe why we're not used to seeing shows just come out right out of the gate being like, hey, we're going to be a little bit nasty, but like at the same time, every bit of it is going to be an earned nastiness.
For satire to work, you need to play the real tone of what it is that you're doing. And to do Veep sugar-coated and defanged and really nice wouldn't make it a satire.
Right.
It wouldn't give it like the real weight and depth that it has. It wouldn't feel authentic. And I am sure that this is a show that is really rooted in like political studies and people who, you know, they were in the DC area. They were filming around Baltimore and DC and Bethesda. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are advisors on this who helped nail the tone and nailed the walk and talks. And yeah, there's not a version of Veep that is nice and that is network friendly that works. It has to be this.
So, Rich, you talked a little bit about the butterfly effect, and I want to dive into that a little bit more. Because of Selina's staff's choices, we get introduced to a couple of additional characters that will follow us probably throughout the show, but we go to this senator's, Barbara Hallow's, a senator's office, and then we meet Dan Egan, who is this, it seems like up and coming political consultant who is a shark for the most part. I do want to call out the woman who plays the actress that plays the senator is also, her name is Kate Burton. She's also in Scandal and plays nearly the same exact character, except it is with a British accent. So that threw me off a little bit.
That's so funny.
But like, what do we think about Dan? It's such a different type of character too, because it seems a lot more ruthless than a bunch of people that can be despicable at times.
So, it is. It's the you do get the feeling of like you want to see someone good at their jobs from Dan. Dan is an absolute psychopath of a character. It is just like he will throw anyone possible under the bus for a little bit of power. He's dating his boss's daughter, who's the Senator Hallows, and breaks up with her over text. He like leaks a story about Senator Hallows over something that she said in a meeting to the press like minutes after he resigns. It is like he will do literally anything, and everybody around him knows that too, but also knows that he's extremely capable. And you know, if there's a butterfly effect of anything, it is everyone is extremely more distraught on Selina's team the second he comes on.
Max, did you want to go?
Yes. So Dan, two things on Dan Egan. One, he is the perfect foil to Mike McClintock because he is the young, cutthroat, hungry guy. There's a line that Mike has around this time where he says that he doesn't want to know a story, so don't tell him. He wants to go off of plausible deniability, whereas Dan wants to know everything so that he can analyze it and see if it's leverage for him. Dan also gets one of the best self-introduction lines of any character I think we've done on this podcast, where he says that he currently works for Senator Hallows, ... currently. And the ellipses on currently does so much heavy lifting.
Right.
I know everything from a pilot read that I need to know about Dan Egan from the ellipses and currently. That is Dan Egan. That is who he is. He is always going to be searching for the next thing. I don't need anyone to tell me that. He tells us that himself.
It's super interesting that we meet Dan, and then on the other side of the coin, we did talk a little bit about Mike McClintock, but there's another character that we meet. I love that this show does not introduce us to the president, right? We only meet people who are associated with the president. And in this instance, that's Jonah Ryan, played by Timothy Simmons, who, if you're currently watching Nobody Wants This, should look like a very familiar face to you. But I absolutely adore having the idiot that nobody likes on the show, because it allows for so many jokes. And I think that Timothy Simmons does such a great job of just improving and you know, going against these other actors and vamping with them.
Timothy Simmons watched hours and hours and hours of Ari Gold on Entourage and said, how do I do that but make me even more despised? It is like, and that doesn't change. He says some of the most vulgar shit on the show that you could possibly imagine, and it is all under the guise of like, I'm going to be powerful one day simply because I surrounded myself. I held on to a job after an internship. That's the entirety of his. I bet right on the candidate for during his campaign.
A low status character who thinks that he is the status of the presidency is going to set up for so much fodder, because it always is going to give people who actually are in higher status roles something to play off of. And I don't want to say that Veep punches down, because it does deal in such a high stakes, like high status world. So like everyone in here has a degree of status. So like making Jonah the buffoon, making him the punching bag does feel appropriate here. And Geoff, you mentioned we never see the president. I never wanted to see the president.
Yeah, same.
Right.
Because this is going to sound so dumb. The show is called Veep. And we've seen the president portrayed in film and media so many times. And so it's really fun to talk about what happens in that tier below. What happens to the forgotten person on the ticket? What happens to the person who does the ceremonial stuff and resides over the Senate and does the handshaking and, you know, the politicking and things like that? I want to see that nitty gritty. I don't need to see the Oval Office. I like just having this one liaison that we can all rip on, because it also shows what we think of the president and what we think of not winning the election.
And then it also gives that like a little bit of that taste of how everyone in Selina's team, including Selina herself, feels about the presidency and that office and everything. Because at the same time, like in the same way, Max, that you said, it's like it feels a little punching down, but it's also, I think it's like flattening the table. It's like, oh, this could be this entire level of conversation. You know, it doesn't feel super elevated. This is not the West Wing by any means. This is like, and I've heard so many people in the same way that a lot of doctors think Scrubs is the closest representation of their show or of their career on TV. So many people in politics have said this is the closest representation of politics on TV. It's not the West Wing. It's not Scandal. It's not any of that.
There's a line a little bit earlier in this pilot where, in talking about Selina's meet and greet with senators and there not being as many people who showed up as I would have liked, where it's, I'm in a big room with 3 people and a fuckload of quiche. And I think that sets the bar for the type of issues we're going to be dealing with.
Yes.
VEEP is not about nuclear codes. VEEP is not about terror threats. VEEP is about, what do I do because no one showed to my luncheon and I have too much fucking quiche.
So we've talked a lot about this pilot, and I feel like we've talked very little about Julia Louis-Dreyfus as a whole.
It's crazy.
And I want to just take a second, rather than save this for things that we loved, and just talk about how perfect she was for this role, in the way that she is able to work across every single person, in the way that we have this this dinner, for this charity dinner that she joins, and I believe that she is the person who's done all of the speeches, and she has the saved lines about like the kitty heels and stuff like that.
Right.
I love this portrayal that she has done, because I think that it is, one, extremely spot on, two, I sort of hate her but love her at the same time. And 3, I want to see how she fucks up every single week after watching this pilot.
Right. You do get a sense that like she does and does not want the presidency at the same time. It's like she wants the idea of the presidency. It's what is it, a line from like Moonstruck or something like that? It's like you don't want me, you want the idea of me or something like that. And I just, first of all, okay, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, it is so insane to me that this show is improvised in any way, because there is so much crosstalk that how could you possibly take in information to address people in the room like through improvisation? Because like the entire time I had to watch with the captions on, because you have to want to make sure you hear what everyone's saying at the same time, but they're literally talking over each other. I have no idea, like my brain would explode trying to improvise with this group of people in that cadence.
Yeah, and Matt Walsh, who plays McClintock, he's a founding member of UCB. He's one of the original 4, but I think he's the only person in this main ensemble to start who comes from that background, which makes it all the more impressive. What I love with watching Selina give a speech is what happens when she's doing the lines, doing the comms team stuff, versus when she tries to infuse herself into things, where she has a line talking about a creepy sexual harasser senator who died, where she just says, he died, he's a dead now, which is, it's constantly the battle of everyone's going to tell Selina that the reasons why she didn't get the nomination are because she wore a silly hat and people didn't resonate with this. And, you know, Dan tells it to her straight. She's surrounded by so many yes people that no one's going to ever tell her what she's really doing wrong because of her orbit. And that's when we get things like he's a dead now, which is just incredible line reading.
God, that was beautiful.
Yeah, like, I mean, that is our pilot. What were some things that you love that maybe we didn't discuss that you believe need a little bit more shine? Rich, I feel like you are like foaming at the mouth to talk about something.
You better believe I had in bold the he died, he's a dead now line. But also there's a line in the whole fiasco about I know we didn't touch on this, but there's a fiasco that happens when the senator dies, and there is a condolence card passed around from the vice president to the president. And while Selina doesn't have time to sign it, she has her head of campaign. I don't know what Amy's official title is.
She's her chief of staff.
Chief of staff. Thank you so much. That's the official way and correct way to say that. She signs her own name by accident. There is a moment where where Selina stops the chaos in her office and with to the back of the house yells, "When a sexual harasser dies, we send his wife a card. That's how Washington works." And I'm like, there is no better line to describe what VEEP is than that. That is I think that's if there had to be one culminating moment, I think that's the one it is.
Max, what about yourself?
It's got to be Dan Egan getting a handshake job because he forged the president's signature. That being the thing that gets him into Selina's office is perfect. We've set up, for however many scenes Dan Egan's been in this pilot, what he's willing to do to make headway in Washington, even committing felonies on day one. He is the guy that's going to do the dirty work. And it's that willingness to get his hands dirty, the complete polar opposite of Mike McClintock's "don't tell me so I can have plausible deniability." Dad will commit felonies for you. That gets him a job. That's how Washington works.
Yeah.
There's one scene that maybe we didn't talk about enough, but the interaction between Gary and Jonah when they are negotiating getting the card back is one of it's a powerhouse of a scene, right? It's so funny. We get to really know Jonah in that scene by him saying that Amy's an 8. And hearing that, it reveals just enough about Jonah that I'm like, oh, I want to see how despicable of a human he is in future episodes. But also the innocence of Gary is something that's so necessary and needed for the show. And Tony Hale masters it. Now, we've talked about things that we loved. I think there is one wait a minute moment that we probably all sort of have, but I'm curious, any wait a minute moments for either of you, things that caused you pause?
For me, I do. This is kind of a little gripe that I have about the show as a whole, because it doesn't end from the pilot. There is so much phone acting on it, and I get it. Everybody's busy, but the note to all the actors that if you are not talking, you are looking down at your phone, I don't think is a necessary part of the show at all moments of the show. We get that they're multitasking. We get that there's a million fires they're trying to put out. I think you could have stepped off the phone, the texting gas, by about 50%. We would have understood. Because
Max,
yeah.
Go ahead, Rich. Sorry.
There's just kind of so many scenes where you're just staring at the top of people's foreheads for the entire scene. And I'm like, I get that that's probably realistic. It's a little overdone. Sorry about that, Max.
I don't know. That makes me feel super tall just seeing people by their forehead. Max, what about yourself?
I don't understand what these cellular devices they're all using. They're these small little black squares that have just dozens and dozens of buttons on them. There's this logo that I'm not familiar with. I think it said BlackBerry when I zoomed in. I'm not sure what all these things are.
Perfect.
Do you guys remember when it was super duper controversial about Obama having a BlackBerry? He initially was not allowed to have one in office because they thought it was a security, there was a potential of a security breach, because maybe that's just me. Only thing that I was thinking about when they were talking about, get him his BlackBerry. And I was like, y'all are allowed to have BlackBerries?
I thought
those were super hackable.
But she does, Sue alludes to her having the BlackBerry essentially hacked when, there is they have to resync her BlackBerry because something about the email or something like that.
Oh yeah,
yeah, she does reference
We allowed a Canadian comms company to have all of our cellular devices in Washington. What's wrong with this country?
Yeah, as far as myself, I mean, we've talked about the show and how the characters are biting. The jokes There are no holds barred, right, in this. And having one of your initial plot lines being Sue uses the R word after hearing someone else use that,
Right.
that's a choice.
Right.
Do I think that they pulled it off? Yes. Did I squirm when I first heard the word used? Also, yes. But yeah, I sort of like hesitate to even call it a wait a minute moment, because it's one of those things where it's like they're supposed to be despicable,
Right.
and like you have to buy into that.
The show
And, like,
hinged on it.
They really looked at each other and they were like, okay, what word are we going to use that's going to be?
I said this once and I'll say it again. It's because people like to talk about Veep every single day for the last 12 years of everything being a Veep situation.
Right.
It's easy to forget that this show premiered in the spring of 2012, was filmed in 2011, was greenlit by HBO in 2009. Like this show went into development 15 years ago, and things move, things change, and it just, you forget that this is going to have dated moments. That's just the way that comedy works, but they keep pushing, they keep evolving, they keep finding new things to play.
Right. I have a super quick question for
Yeah.
both of you. I got this feeling, because it's been a while since I watched this pilot now. I got this feeling that I felt a little let down that Selina is not good at her job. And I don't think that cumulatively throughout like the speech that she's supposed to vamp for, like the mistakes that she's making, they the fact that Gary needs to tell her everything about every single like senator. There's only 100 senators, like these, and you're the person going in to like cast the vote with these people. You were sitting in on Senate sessions. They made her bad at her job, and I don't know. I feel like they should have made it more clear that like this is why she's in this position, and instead, like I didn't get that from her character. What did you guys think about that?
I think that, in all honesty, I really liked it.
Yeah.
Right? Because it sort of makes it more believable that the person who is a little bit bad at their job would be the vice president instead of being the president. Like if she was super smooth at her job, right?
Yeah.
And like that knew everyone's name, was able to pull a speech out after the speech that was planned got basically like marked out, and a permanent marker to everything. Like, it's a lot more believable to me that you have this person come. It's the backup quarterback, right? There's a reason they're the backup quarterback, and there's things that they're good at, but there's also things that they're not good at. And sometimes we want to just see someone be bad at what they're supposed to be good at.
Right.
I think if you're going to take the second most powerful person in the country and frame a goofy workplace comedy around them, we do need to see them fumble and bumble their way through it a little bit. I also was curious watching this, how far into this term is Selina Meyer? Like they just kind of drop you in there. So I was curious, like, are we early from inauguration? Is this in the middle of a term? I don't really remember Veep's timeline. It's been a while since I've watched it as well. So I was kind of thinking about that. But it also does set up that while she's struggling now, you know that she can't do this forever if the show is going to be successful and resonate. So at some point it has to click. The pieces around her have to come together. I think it's going to be that thing of everything will start to sync up. The wheels will start turning. People will find their roles and support her, and she'll succeed. But you have to start her off somewhere. You can't just have her at the top because there's nowhere for her to go.
100%.
Well, we do have one more question, and this is an in-flight question. This one was submitted to us via Instagram, and it simply says, the vice president tends to be a fairly overlooked position in terms of responsibility. What is one additional responsibility you think they should have to feel a little bit more important? So Max is wringing his hands as if he's been like cooking something up for days. So Max, what is this additional responsibility?
It is time we give the vice president the role of commissioner of Major League Baseball.
like how when we took like a former Supreme Court justice and made them the first commissioner of baseball.
Yeah, all right, I'm willing to listen. Max, give us more detail.
For too long, the decentralized and version of Major League Baseball has proven it cannot be sustained. There's not enough regulation on it. And as a result, owners who are billionaires are cutting costs, cutting corners, and putting out an inferior product to their fans and to their cities. We need to get the VEEP in charge of Major League Baseball. We need to get some centralization here. We need to improve this for the sport as a whole. Oakland A's owner John Fisher needs to be brought in before a Senate committee hearing to speak on his crimes. And maybe we should just look into breaking up the Yankees. I don't know. Maybe it's just something we need to discuss.
Yeah. We're going to antitrust the Yankees.
Rich, what about yourself?
I think the vice president should have to be part of the Blue Angels. I think if you're running an air show in San Antonio, Texas, the vice president has to be in the lead plane.
I mean, I love that. Personally, this is for me. I think that the vice president has to go to every major sporting event finals and say the Pledge of Allegiance. We like
That's a sick job.
We have Lift Every Voice. We have God Bless America. We have the national anthem. Make it like kindergarten in first grade, where they have to stand up in front of
deliver the Gettysburg Address
with their hand over their heart, and they have to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And you know what?
They have to do the coffee for closer speech from Glenn Ross.
What a great selling point of like, you get to go to every national, like every major sporting event, like final, like hell yeah. Now I even want to be the vice president even more. It's like, hey, you lost out on getting the nomination. Now you get to go to all of these sporting events for the next 4 years.
I would be in the snack and beer line at every game until that was over.
Well, thank you so much for that in-flight question. Let's talk a little bit more about the history of this show. So this show had 7 seasons and 65 episodes. As I discussed before, interestingly enough, this show's writing staff was entirely made up of British people for the first 4 seasons of this show. First 4 seasons of this show. As we talked about, the show was primarily filmed in the DMV area for the first 4 seasons. They built a soundstage there as well to be able to
You're welcome, British comedians that we've like forced to live in Maryland.
And that was up until season 5, where they got the tax incentives from the state of California to film there, and then they would film at 8 days at a time in the DMV to make sure that they got exterior shots. There are DVDs of every single one of these seasons with deleted scenes and director commentary and all those fun things. What a great gift that you could give someone that you love. You can also find the show on HBO Max. Let's talk a little bit about...
Did you guys stick around after the show to watch the deleted scenes that were removed from the pilot on Max?
I did not, but I'm
every single episode now, like the way that Max has them formatted is that yes, there's a full credit sequence, and Veep always did like their end, like they overlap their end credits with the final scene. After the end credits is deleted scenes from each episode. Now that's what's on Max, so you get to see what was cut from the pilot, which I don't think we've ever gotten to see that from any pilot we've done so far.
I mean, this is not about the history of the show, but I miss having gag reels at the end of movies, and I think that we need to instate it, like put that back in place for sitcoms, or like it's even funnier for drama shows where they say something terrible and then the person just starts cracking up and is like, I'm so sorry, everyone.
Sorry for interrupting, Geoff. Tell me how many surfboards Julia Louis-Dreyfus has.
So surprisingly, there are 0 surfboards for Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Because we need to get the 18-year-olds out and voting. If you're 18, if you're 19, if you're listening to this, there is still time. If you're 18 years old, stay in line.
Stay in line to turn 19.
But this show has 184 nominations and 60 wins. Nearly award win for every episode of the show. That includes 17 Emmy Awards, 4 of which are for Julia Louis-Dreyfus for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy.
R.I.P. to any show that wasn't this and Modern Family.
Yeah, literally just absolutely insane. They did also get some Critics' Choice Awards, SAG Awards, like all of those. Like what was super interesting, not a single Golden Globe Award for this show was won. They had a few nominations, but like maybe that says something about those awards. We'd love to be invited next year.
Did they get any BAFTAs for the writing team?
They did not receive a single BAFTA, at least for this version of the show, right? But yeah, that is the history of this show, right? It's pretty cool when we can talk about a show that benefits the community, has such an amazing history as far as award domination, and also has a pretty interesting history as far as its writing room. But Rich, it is now time for your game of the week.
It's vice presidential trivia, and as my guest for vice presidential trivia, it's Vice President Al Gore. Al Gore, come in.
Hi, everybody.
I swear to God, if you walked in the room, I would literally I'd shit my pants. I'd be like, I don't know what to do now.
Look, socially, I only have so many opportunities to email Al Gore's office. I should have used one for this one, but we'll see. Okay, so. This is all three of these questions are pretty fascinating. I was just doing some research last night. So this is a long question, but bear with me because the topic is fucking awesome. So we have a vice president who composed a song that eventually became a Billboard #1, which is like mind blowing to think about. That, of course, is Republican Charles Dawes. He was Calvin Coolidge's vice president. Dawes composed the song "It's All in the Game," eventually recorded by one Tommy Edwards and hit the top of the charts. These are like 40 years apart. This is 1958. He originally composed the song in 1911. So the song accomplished three things. It was the #1 song to be written by a vice president. Only #1 song to be written by a vice president. Number 2, it was the only #1 song to be written by a Nobel laureate. Dawes was both. And then number 3, the performer Tommy Edwards became the first African American to have a Billboard #1 song.
Very
1958, cool. Because the Billboard charts were started in August 1958. So there were other ways of measuring #1 hit songs, but they were not Billboard related. Which of these acts did not have a #1 song in the same year, 1958?
Ooh.
The Champs, who did the song Tequila, Alvin and the Chipmunks, Sheb Wooley, who did the song The Purple People Eater, or Buddy Holly.
Go for it, Max.
I'm gonna say Buddy Holly.
Geoff?
I'm gonna say The Purple People Eater.
It was in fact Buddy Holly. Between Alvin and the Chipmunks, who at that point their act was called David Seville and the Chipmunks. Like David Seville is the guy who voiced all of them. The #1 song in America in 1958 for 12 weeks was a novelty song between different I Called the Witch Doctor. There's their Christmas song, and then Sheb Wooley's Purple People Eater. There was a #1 song that was a novelty song for a quarter of the year.
So to the people who are complaining about Sabrina Carpenter, Taylor Swift, and Chappell Rowan owning the #1, shut up. It could be so much worse.
Eisenhower was in office. Novelty songs were dominating the charts.
It was a simpler time in America.
And I don't know if you would call it Tequila a novelty song, but after Pee-wee's Playhouse, I would consider it one. And all right, let's go on to question number 2. During his time as minister to France, Levi Morton, who was Benjamin Harrison's vice president, was the person who actually officially received the Statue of Liberty. So he was the first person. They're like, here you go. Mm-hmm. Which, as we know, is a Trojan horse by the French to spy on us for over a century. As a ceremonial gesture, they let him put the first rivet in the statue's what? Hand, toe, torch, or crown?
That's some good mode in there, Geoff.
I would say toe.
What do you got, Max?
I'm going to say crown.
It was the big left toe on the statue. He put the ceremonial first rivet in there.
Big feet guy.
Yeah, Vice President Morton, huge foot fetish. Huge foot fetish.
Like, only huge feet, though. That's the big thing.
Okay, very last one. Richard Johnson, the Veep under Martin Van Buren, was famous for abandoning his office to do what for his business in Kentucky? 1, bartend. 2, play softball. 3, breed horses. 4, cook heroin.
There's a fun one here. Max, what are you thinking?
Gosh, I'm going to say bartend. I'm going to go with the simplest one.
You know what I'm going with, Rich. Let's get cooking.
Geoff, I'm so sorry, but nobody cooked here. He did not cook heroin, breed horses, or play softball. He did bartend at his own bar that he owned and actually had to vacate office because after the Panic of 1837, they were worried that he was in such financial ruins that he would essentially muddy the waters of the vice president's office to get more money for himself. So yeah, they made Jimmy Carter sell his peanut farm. Anyways, that's my game of the week.
Well, Rich, thank you so much for your game of the week. Gentlemen, we are at the end of our flight, but I have 2 questions for you before this plane lands.
End of the term.
The first one is based off of the pilot of this show. Would you continue watching more Veep, or maybe there's something else you want to watch? And the second question is,
maybe there's just something else you want to watch, like
something.
It's either the Veep or the World Series.
That's it. It's baseball or Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and I'm gonna make you choose.
I'm so tired of having to choose between the two of them.
But
my two loves.
My second question, though, is it's a little bit more of a serious tone, right? The writers of Veep have said that, hey, the show could not continue because it was getting hard to create storylines that were not already coming up naturally in the political world that the United States is facing today. And it sort of brings to question, do you think there's a space for a political satire in the world right now? We're not getting more Veep, right? I don't think we will ever get more Veep, but do you think that people have the mental space to dig even more into politics that make them anxious and stuff, but with a little humor associated with it? So, Rich, I'm going to ask you, what are you thinking?
So I think any show that is related to the White House, the top executive branches of our government, those are all going to be separate or the antithesis of what we're seeing in real life, because people don't want the reality of The Office. When The West Wing came out, it was on the heels of the Monica Lewinsky scandal. A lot of people were saying oh, we have completely lost the thread of any respectability in politics. It was on the heels of CNN and Fox News, basically destroying our communication about politics. And we got this show because I think we started seeing a lot of more optimism with the office of the president with Barack Obama. And I don't think you could do a show like this in a chaotic era of governing. It is I don't think a show like this would feel good in the Trump years. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So if, God willing, if next week turns out the way we want it to, I would say maybe we'll get another fun drama about politics the way Scandal did. And suffice to say, I'm watching more of the show. It is front to back. It is so good. It is so you don't want to miss a second. Everyone is so funny. You are watching improvising performers at their peak. Every improv comedian in LA or New York wanted to have a guest spot on the show the same way they do with Curb Your Enthusiasm. This is it.
Max, what about yourself?
I'm going to do the easy one first. Yes, I will continue watching more of Veep off the pilot alone, even removing the fact that I've seen this entire show, just going back and rewatching this pilot. There's so many characters we're introduced to. It's a show that out of the gate has such a specific tone and perspective on the world, and I want to play more in that world. I want to explore that sandbox further, and I would definitely want to keep watching and keep like diving into that. I think that we've had an issue since Veep came out where it's become impossible for us as a culture society to separate like fictitious stories from the world that they're happening in, or even to not tie everything, no matter what the stretch is, to the political climate. And I think that it just makes this topic really tough to do. I think about even something that was kind of finding its legs, but never quite got off the ground, like Mr. Mayor at NBC, where he was like a billboard and real estate magnate who ran for mayor of LA. And then Rick Caruso kind of had to ruin the fun of that by being a billboard and real estate magnate who ran for mayor of LA. Like every record that came out in like 2017 and beyond was criticized for whether or not it promptly had a social or political opinion on the current state. It's like not everything has to be that, but I just don't think we can currently separate it. I would love to find a space where we could in the future, and things have to go a certain way for us to be able to do that. So I hope we can, but for right now, it's a no.
For myself, yes, absolutely watching more of this show. I was talking with my partner and sort of was just like, I forget why I stopped watching this show, because there was a point where I was like, oh, this is appointment television. And then something just happened where I was like, there's more of this for me to watch, and I can't wait to watch it. As far as room for political satire, I sort of go back to the show that, if you want to listen to us talk about the show Inside Job, highly recommend you listen to that episode. That's the sort of political satire that I think we have room for. Something that is just so absurdist and separated from the executive branch. Key word there, the executive branch, that we can just sort of be like, okay, like this is funny and kooky and wild, and we're making fun of a lot of things, but not focusing on the person who's really in charge, or the head of the snake in this instance. That is what I would love for networks, folks like that, to be able to say, you know what, let's do this. People don't like, let's do something about, Netflix tried the Space Force show, and unfortunately that just was not it. Can't wait to do that pilot. But I think that there is an opportunity to talk about non-executive branch and make it political satire, and people just have a lot of fun with it. But who knows? We'll see. Fingers crossed. Well, gentlemen, that is our flight. But before we go, where can folks find you? Rich, where can folks find you?
You can find me having so many tubes in me, I look like a set of bagpipes. You can also find me on Instagram at Damn That's Rich. You can find original sketch comedy from Max and myself on TikTok at Dadwagon Comedy.
Max, where can folks find you?
You can find me in a fuckload of quiche and on all things social media at Maxwell Sig.
And you can find me wearing glasses, the wheelchair of the eye. But if you're looking for me on social media, you can find me at Run Jeff Run. You can find the TV Pilot's License anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also find us on any social media platform at TV Pilot's License. If you have a question for the show or for our next episode, you can submit a question at tvpilotslicense.com, or give us a call and leave us a voicemail at 213-290-1713. We look forward to hearing from you then. But make sure to watch out for some of the sneak previews of some of the stuff that we have coming up, especially around the holidays. Can't wait. But with the plane landed and the seatbelt sign off, we look forward to flying the bright skies of the TV world with you again soon. And until then,
happy Halloween!